you can use a function table to help you graph functions. Essentially, you're going to take what you know about function tables, and you're going to use a function table to help you create a set of ordered pairs. And then finally, once you have those ordered pairs, you're going to graph them onto the graph. Now, the rule for this function table is 3x plus 1. And you can see that in this column right here. It says rule 3x plus 1. One thing you may notice is that this function table does not have any input values. It doesn't give us any numbers to plug into our rule. Well, the good news is we get to pick our own values. The bad news is you need to think ahead about the numbers you're going to pick. We want to make sure that the numbers we pick, both the inputs and the outputs, are going to fit onto this graph. So I don't want to pick an x value of 20, because if I had to go over 20, it wouldn't fit on my graph. And even though my graph, my x values go up to 12 or 10, if I picked an input value of 10, my rule is 3x, which means I'm going to multiply that by 3, which means my answer would be somewhere in the 30s. So again, I got to be smart about the decisions I make. I'm going to pick 0, 1, 2, and 3 as my input values. And what I'm going to do in this column here is I'm going to apply my rule. My rule is 3 times x plus 1. Here it's going to be 3 times x plus 1. So I've got 3 times 2 plus 1 and 3 times 3 plus 1. Now you won't always be given this column to fill in your rule. But when it's here, you have to use it. And it's a good idea because it helps you get your output numbers. So if my input is my input is 0, and my rule is 3 times 0 plus 1, my output is just going to be 1, because 3 times 0 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. Now let's do the same thing for an input of 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. Now I have input values and output values. Now here's what you need to know. Your input values and your output values are going to go together. These are your x values. These are your y values, and together they're going to create your ordered pairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this input value for x, this output value for y, and I'm going to create an ordered pair that I can graph. 0, 1 is right there, over 0, up 1. My next input is 1, and my output is 4. That makes an ordered pair 1, 4. So over 1, up 4. Next, I have an input of 2 and an output of 7. That gives me 2, 7, over 2, up 7. And finally, I have an input of 3 and an output of 10, which gives me 3, 10. So I'm going to go over 3, up 10. Once I have all these dots on my graph, all I need to do is connect them together with a straight edge, and I have graphed my function. Now this function goes on and on forever. It doesn't stop. So I'm going to draw my line past my dots, and I'm also going to put an arrow on the end to show that it's going to keep going on forever. Now, sometimes they'll give you a graph and they want to know what's the rule for the graph. The easiest way to do this is going to be to create a function table. So you can pick any points on this line. I'm going to start here with 0, 0. My input value is 0, and my output value is 0. And I know that because my ordered pair is 0, 0. And remember, the x value of your ordered pair is your input, and the y value of your ordered pair is your output. So if you can create an ordered pair, like in this case 2, 1, then you can create your inputs and your outputs. Your input here would be x, your output would be y. Let's look at this point here. This is 4, 2, which means I have an input of 4 and an output of 2. And finally, last but not least, I've got this point here, which is over 6, up 3. So 6, 3 gives me an x value of 6 and a y value of 3. So now that I've got a function table, figuring out the rule for this function is just like what we used to do. We're going to look at our x values, we're going to look at our y values, and we see that going from x to y, our numbers are decreasing, which means my rule is either going to be a subtraction rule or a division rule. Now if I look at my first pair of numbers, In order for this to be a subtraction rule, to go from 0 to 0, it would have to be 0 minus 0. So if I look at my next pair, 2 minus 0, that doesn't work out. So I know it's not a subtraction rule, which means it's got to be some sort of division rule. So I'm going to look at my my x values, and I'm going to say, okay, 2 divided by what is going to give me 1? I think my rule is going to be divide by 2. So if I put it in 2 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So it's my x value divided by 2. Now what we're going to do is we're not just going to leave our rule like that. We want to make this rule work for our ordered pairs. So it's not just x divided by 2. That is going to give me my y value. So x divided by 2 equals y. Because remember, that's going to equal my output. And you can also write it with the y in front if you want, in which case it would look like this. Y equals x divided by 2.